Conditioning is something that we all have. It's about the environment that we are brought up in, the environments we surround ourselves with. So for instance, if you're someone that parties every weekend, in your head you think this is what everybody does. And trust me, that's something I struggled with for a very long time. When I wanted to stop drinking and stop taking drugs, I didn't realize that there were other people that were doing that, because in my eyes, everyone in the world was doing this shit. Even though they might not have been talking about it, everyone was doing it. It's glorified in movies, it's glorified on TV, it's glorified on social media. Party life. This is what you want to do. This is what everyone is doing. Anyone that is anyone is partying. Legends, what is up? Thanks for joining me on another week of the Interchange podcast. I'm Ben Lowe, your host, and today I have a solo episode for you all, which has been requested by one of my Instagram followers. So today we're going to be talking about conditioning. And when I say conditioning, I'm not talking strength conditioning. I'm not talking about boxing. I'm not talking about any kind of fitness at all. This is the mental conditioning that we pick up through our life that conditions us or gives us a paradigm one way or the other. So in other words, for instance, we might believe that our parents never loved us because of the actions that we saw them doing when we were at a young age, because we couldn't actually regulate our emotions and work through what was actually happening for them. We could only see what was in front of us with our tiny little brains at the time. It could be the thought of thinking that all cops are pieces of shit, or police officers, which is, once again, completely wrong. This is something that I used to struggle with because of the environment that I was in. And this is generally where conditioning comes from. It comes from our environment, or the things that we're exposed to at a young age, which forge these stories that we tell ourselves, which aren't necessarily the truth. It's just one perspective that we have. And as we grow and as we shift our paradigms, these stories may change. Now, this is where it's important to go back and revisit the conditioning that we have and have a look at whether that same story we're telling ourselves aligns with the person that we're becoming, or whether it's maybe time to let go of that. But before we go into that, guys, I just want to quickly say that if there's any topics you guys want me to talk about, like for instance conditioning or something like that, as T has requested, shout out to T for the request, thank you, then send me a message, send me a comment, do something, get my attention, let me know what it is you want me to talk about, because I'd rather be giving you guys the value that you want as opposed to just the stuff that I want to talk about, because trust me, I've got heaps of shit that I want to talk about and share with you guys. But I'd much rather be giving you the value that you guys want, because that's what these solo podcasts are all about. And also the ones I do with guests, it's about giving you guys as much value as we can, because the purpose behind the Interchange podcast is that there's maybe one person out there that might hear one of these episodes and it gives them that little push in the right direction to realize that change is always possible, but it starts from within. So anyways, over to the episode now. Conditioning. Conditioning is something that we all have. And generally, like I said in the beginning, it's about the environment that we are brought up in, the environments we surround ourselves with. So for instance, if you're someone that parties every weekend, in your head you think this is what everybody does. And trust me, that's something I struggled with for a very long time. When I wanted to stop drinking and stop taking drugs, I didn't realize that there were other people that were doing that, because in my eyes, everyone in the world was doing this shit. Even though they might not have been talking about it, everyone was doing it. It's glorified in movies, it's glorified on TV, it's glorified on social media. Party life. This is what you want to do. This is what everyone is doing. Anyone that is anyone is partying, which is completely false. But this is the conditioning that I had for such a long time. Now, that's a very surface level conditioning that we might have, but another conditioning we might have is that men are pieces of shit, or all girls are thieves, or all girls are gold diggers. And this all comes back to that story that we're telling ourselves because of a situation or what's the word I'm looking for? A situation, I guess, will be the one that we run with. A situation that we find ourselves in. So however that situation might have played out, then what will happen is we might find that a similar situation plays out and brings back up the feelings of that first situation. And even though they're not exactly the same, what happens is we start to get this conditioning that all people are like this. There's no such thing as good people in the world. Everyone's money hungry. I can't trust anyone. Like I said previously, all men are pieces of shit. This is something that a lot of us struggle with, and it gives us this perspective of the world that might necessarily not be 100% true. It's just a lens at which we're looking at the world through because of the previous conditioning. So this is something that I struggled with for such a long time, and I'll share a bit of my story with you. So a lot of you guys know that I was addicted to ice, which is a pretty hard drug, and an even harder drug to get off. Something like 5%, I think the odds are, the statistics are 5% of people that use ice will ever completely stop. So I'm glad to say that I'm in that 5% because since I completely stopped 6 years ago, I haven't touched it. Don't get me wrong, there's still times where I think about it, because when we're, I guess, out of the situation, all we see is, the bad. But when we're in the situation, all we see is the good. But every now and then, from time to time, we'll start to see the good in the situation. So conditioning can actually come to haunt us also in relationships. If we've been in relationships that are abusive, if we've had a parent that was abusive, if we've had people that were controlling, we see that as normal in a relationship, which isn't the case. Now, this is something that I know a lot of women go through and also a lot of men, but it isn't spoken about as much for men, but it is just as toxic. So we find ourselves in a position where we feel like we might not be good enough because of that conditioning that we have from the past. So we settle for less than what we actually deserve or what we are worth. We take on shitty behavior in relationships. We put up with abuse. We might go from person to person because we don't know how to be alone. And this is something I struggled with for such a long time, but this is all conditioning. This is all down to conditioning. And conditioning only happens because of a situation that repeats itself and then it becomes our norm. Once again, these are generally formed from a young age. So from the ages of 1 to 7, we're taking in everything in our environment. Not even 1 to 7, sorry. From the ages of 0, we leave the womb. And not even before we leave the womb, we actually take in the information around us and in our environment that our mothers are taking in whilst we're in the womb. So crazy thought. But our programming and writing of the computer program that we are today actually starts before we are even born. Right? Pretty crazy. So this is why it's important to try and reduce stress and be in the best environment and be around the best people and bring your baby into the world in the best possible circumstances, because there's certain people that I wouldn't like my son to be hanging around. So in my life, I've removed those people from my environment and from his environment because these aren't the sorts of people that I want him to see as being normal. Because this is the thing, what we see and what we grow up around is what we perceive as normal. So if you're shouting at your partner or throwing shit around the house or breaking stuff in front of your kids, they're going to think that's normal. If you're a man that's in and out of relationships and introducing your son or your daughter to different girls all the time, or even for girls, different guys all the time, if you're bringing your kids around those environments, I'm sorry to say, but you are setting them up for a failure, because that is the conditioning that they're going to think of as normal. Dad was a slut, I'll be a slut. Whether you're a girl or a boy, it doesn't matter. But we see that as normal, so it's like, okay, that's all right. For me, that's once again something that I struggled with as well, because I saw my dad, well, even this is the thing, from an older age, I found out that dad had been in a lot of relationships, been married 6 times or something like that, and cheated on mum. So to me, I was like, well, that's normal, until I broke that norm. Now, this is the thing, even though you have this conditioning, even though it might affect you up until this day, you right now have the choice to break away from that and tell yourself a different story, because the story that you're following right now might not necessarily even be true and might not necessarily even be your story. But because of that conditioning, you're stuck in that trance of thinking that this is normal and this is what happens. So the first part of, I guess, breaking away from that conditioning and breaking away from those stories is thinking about the things in your life that aren't ideal, the limiting beliefs you have, the situations that you keep finding yourself in, whether it's being around partners, whether it be around relationships, whether it be around work, whether it be around business, finances. Conditioning for you around finance could be that money is hard to make, so when I make it, I have to hold on to it. That lack and scarcity mindset around money. So the first thing is to identify these things that are no longer serving you, or this conditioning that is holding you back. So these things that have been embedded in you from a young age. And the next part of that is to think back to the first time that you experienced this, the first time that this story was something that was relevant for you, the first time that that conditioning came up for you that you can remember, and go deep within. And now think about the person you are today, the way that you dealt with that and the way that you took on that story. Is that still the same way that you take on that story today? And if not, then this is your chance to rewrite that story. This is where I really, really love to journal. So journaling is something that I do every day. It's something that I get all my clients to do, and it's something that you should do too, because it's a way of unpacking your subconscious brain, unpacking the stuff that's embedded deep within your head and putting it down onto paper. It's also a way of letting go of things, and it's also a way for rewriting the stories that are no longer serving you. So think about your best self, the best version of you. And even if you're not that person right now, if you're not that person yet, think about the fact that you are right now, okay? So imagine that you are. How would the best version of you have dealt with that situation? How would the best version of you showing up in that situation? How would the best version of you have moved through that situation? And write that down. Because now this is going to start to become your new benchmark for how you're going to deal with these situations in the future. For instance, if it's in a relationship and you keep finding yourself in shitty relationships where you're reliant on the other person for happiness, write down how your best self would deal with that. How would your best self deal with being happy? How would your best self deal with love? Would it be learning to love yourself first? Because once you start to put this down on paper, even though you might think that, yes, I need to start learning to love myself, you're putting it down on paper. You're actually starting to write a contract with yourself. This is the thing, even though you might break contracts with other people and might break promises to other people, and I'm sure you probably break promises to yourself as well, if you start to put these things on paper and then start to live up to these contracts and up to these promises, it's going to instill more trust in yourself, but also allow other people to trust you, which will allow other people to come into your environment, and in turn, changing the environment, it will change your conditioning. Once again, back to the drug and alcohol story with me, I didn't know that there's other people out there that didn't drink and didn't take drugs every weekend. When I started to hang around other people, I'm going to shout out Meg and Will Martin here for the Mega Run community, because when I started to hang around the Mega Run community, it changed my life. I realized there was other people out there on Sunday morning, Saturday morning, whatever time of day, whatever day it was, out there getting after it on the weekend, that weren't waking up hungover and weren't feeling like shit and sleeping the whole weekend away just to, feel like crap all through the week and do it all over again. That was a big pivotal moment for me, was realizing that there was other people out there doing it. And trust me, if you're at a certain situation right now where you are and you're stuck and you feel like there's nothing else, there always is. There's always other people. You just need to go and find those people. Think about this. So your best self, whatever difference there might be between who he or she is right now and who he or she might be in the future, where would that best self hang out? And where would the best self find friends that would be doing the same sorts of things? Because the old saying, fake it till you make it, I sort of like that, I sort of don't like it, but start to elevate yourself by separating yourself from the people that you have been hanging around and start to hang around other people, because you're either going to be held back and brought down to other people's levels by the people you surround yourself with, or you're going to be forced to level the fuck up and elevate to the level of the people you're surrounding yourself with so that you become part of their tribe. Environment is everything. So with the conditioning side of things, the conditioning you have now doesn't mean that's the way you're always going to be. I always used to think, and I was this way for a very, very long time, all police officers are shit. I used to hate cops. And then I actually started to train 2 police officers, detectives. And this was a massive conflict of interest and a conflict of my identity at the time, because I'd only just been released from jail and started as a PT. And I'd taken on these 2 cops that actually ended up being lovely people, great humans. And even they said that, it's not surprising that police get a bad name, because there are the ones out there that just take the piss. But in my head, I hated cops because they took my life away. They put me in jail. But when I was able to remove myself from the situation, look at it for what it was, the reason I was in jail was completely because of me. It was no one else's fault but my own. I was the one that took the drugs. I was the one that sold the drugs. I was the one that stole the cars. I was the one that did X, Y, and Z. And generally, look, there's things that I did that I still think, the time I got for that was shit. But it was all due to my previous record, which was something that I did. I put my hand up for that now. I own that shit. The reason I am who I am and where I am today is because of the shit I did then. But also the reason I was in jail was because of the stuff that I did that time in my life, or at that time in my life. So this is the thing. Even though you might not be able to control the circumstances, you can control your reactions to them. And that's the same with conditioning. So this mindset or this paradigm that you have around something in particular, it doesn't have to always be that way. Think about how these paradigms or this conditioning might be letting you down. And when I say paradigm, also, I'll just clarify that paradigm's like a perspective. So like I said, so all cops are shit, all women are gold diggers, all men cheat, all tradies stink, all people that go to the gym take steroids. These are all paradigms that we believe. These are perspectives that we have. And until we can find a way to break that paradigm, because this is the thing, a lot of those things I said, they're negative. Yeah, if you have a negative paradigm around anything, it's up to you to break that. And once again, a lot of this comes back to the conditioning. So it's the life that we've lived up until this day has conditioned us to this very point in time. So by identifying the paradigms that are no longer serving us and shifting them, and identifying the conditioning that we might have that might no longer be true or might have been due to who we were at the time, and taking that on in the current mindset we had or current perspective we had, then we can start to actually really deal with these things and stop them coming up. Because until you break the pattern of that conditioning, you're going to keep playing into it. And I'm going to reference back to another episode I did around mindset. I don't actually, did I do a podcast episode or maybe just a reel around this? But yeah, so the RAS, or reticular activating system, whatever we focus on is what we bring into our awareness. It's a part of the brain that's like the body's shit filter. And with our conditioning, if we're focusing on all the negative things because we've been conditioned to be negative, we're only going to see negative things. But if we start to flick that and change that, then we'll start to see more positives. And more positives will start to present themselves to us. And it wasn't that those things weren't there before. It's just that we flicked a switch in our head and something's finally changed for us. And now we can start to see things for what they really are, or what we believe they really are. And this is the thing. You might shift back and forth between these two mindsets or these paradigms. But when you start to become aware of that, you can pull yourself out of it quite quickly rather than just being stuck in that mindset. You know, all men are pieces of shit. All women are gold diggers. These aren't things that will serve you, because I can guarantee that there are some good men out there. Lots of good men. And there are some great women as well that aren't just looking for money. But the problem is you're probably just looking in the same place you've always looked. You're fishing in the same pond. Yeah? So if you want to change that conditioning, it needs to start from within. Just like all change. Any change that you want to make within your life, it comes from within. So this isn't an overnight fix, but by starting to identify it, it'll start to bring awareness to the things that are letting you down and not serving you, so you can start to make changes to those things. And by the way, if this is something that you're interested in, this is actually something that I cover in my coaching. We work through limiting beliefs, we work through mindset shifts, we work through paradigm shifts, we work through insecurities, and we work through helping you to let go of the stories that might no longer be true, so you can start to write your own story and become the author in your own book. And that is your book of life. So look, if there's one thing I want to leave you with today, it is that these conditionings or these stories that we have, they either serve us or they don't. But we need to be aware of whether the ones that are serving us, or we need to become aware of the ones that aren't serving us. And then it's up to us as conscious human beings to move through that and rewrite the story for ourselves. So before I head off as well, I do have a couple of spots available for coaching at the moment. So if you want to talk about this more, even if you just like to have a chat about where you're at, where you'd like to be, and how I guess you can start to make those changes, no obligations at all to work with me. I'd love just to jump on a call and help you to unpack what's going on for you, and maybe start to help to shift that paradigm and plant some different seeds that are going to grow different fruits for you. Because if you're looking at everything from a point of view that is spoiled, so think about like a spoiled apple that ruins a crop, everything around you is going to be spoiled. But if we can start to change that and in turn blossom, harvest, grow some new fruit, that we can start to focus on some more positive things, some yummy tasting apples, then in turn, everything in life's going to start to get better, and your focus will shift, and so will your mindset towards everything. And in turn, you can change the conditioning. You can rewrite the program. You can rewrite your own story. So if you do want to have more of a chat about that, click the link below. There is a coaching form on that link that you can jump on and shoot out a request. We can jump on a call and go from there. But otherwise, guys, thanks for jumping on, having a listen. I hope this has given you guys some value. Thanks for the request as well, T. If there's anyone else that would like me to talk about anything or go more in depth around anything, please shoot me a message, because like I said, I'd love to be giving you guys the value that you want rather than just talking about the shit I want to talk about, because there's plenty of that. And I do love to talk. Peace out, guys. I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.